Welcome to another edition of CloseMode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm very fortunate to be here with Robert Christini, who is the Senior Director, Lending Solution Sales at Cox Automotive. Robert, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, happy to be here. Excited to be here with the CloseMode group.
Cool. So you and I were chatting. I entitled this session between the two of us of it ain't over till it's over, right? And that's kind of the conversation you and I were having about kind of getting deals closed and dealing with deal slippage. And one of the numbers I ran by you the other week is that deals that are forecasted at 90% level are closing at 47.6 today, which is less than the odds of flip of a coin or a craps table. So it's a crapshoot, literally. And I just wonder, what do you think the root cause or root causes are of that issue?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brian. And I talk about this all the time with my reps, right? As we're going through our monthly reports and forecasting what's actually going to close. I see it more difficult than ever right now to kind of anticipate when deals are going to get done. And I think the big reason behind that is, you're getting that yes from a decision maker, but then there's so many steps beyond that you actually have to complete until that contract actually gets signed.
Yeah.
And honestly, that's probably taking longer than ever right now. I mean, from compliance, IT, security reviews, contract negotiations, red lines on agreements. I'm seeing more red lines than ever coming in from our lender partners. So it's really delaying, when that deal is actually going to get done. Because yes, you got that decision maker to agree with you and buy in, but there are so many steps after that a salesperson has to go through to actually complete that contract and get it signed and then get it into implementation, that it's just taken longer than ever.
Yeah, and you kind of leaned into my next question, which is like trend lines. Yeah, is in addition to the red lines, like, so it sounds like it's getting worse over time rather than better. And do you think there's any other reasons why that is, it ain't over till it's over thing is getting worse in the last year or so?
I don't know if there's a specific reason. Obviously I sell into the lender space. Lenders are highly regulated, right? So they have to make sure that compliance is in place, due diligence has been completed, financials have been reviewed. And I think, just with what's going on from a banking perspective, they want to make sure when they're signing on to a vendor that there's no issues behind the scenes. So I think that's one of the reasons. I think the other is really just the amount of red lines that are occurring in our space. Before, I think, you'd have an agreement out there. There may be a minor tweak or two before a deal gets done. Now I'm seeing across the line almost every agreement that my team's sending out into the marketplace. There's at least, 5 to 10 red lines that are coming back. Some are simple, some are very complicated. When you get into complicated red lines, that's really when it kind of pushes out that time frame.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
I tell my team all the time, you got to be a jack of all trades as a salesperson nowadays. The reason for that, right? You got to almost be an implementation manager. You have to go through what that process is going to look like. IT and security, making sure you understand what IT requirements are needed for that lender to implement your services and the amount of calls you have to do around that. And again, from a contracting perspective, you have to make sure, hey, you have to be enough to be dangerous from a legal perspective. I don't want my team being a legal representative,
Right.
But if they can catch a lot of those things up front, if they see something that maybe sticks out that maybe our legal team hasn't agreed to in the past, they can kind of let them know that up front, right? So you kind of push that along behind the scenes before you're kicking that contract over to your legal side. So a lot of different areas that make it pretty complicated for my sales team to really dive in and sell to these lenders. But, that doesn't keep them from stopping doing it. And we continue to push forward.
Yeah. And I wonder what sort of steps are you taking to ensure that like yes really turns into yes in a book deal, and anything else you're doing in your organization that others may benefit from?
Yeah, I think one thing is doing a lot more pre-S. So my team is well equipped with a due diligence packet. So making sure that kind of gets set out, as soon as we kind of feel like the deal's working along, we know it's going to take those next steps, maybe getting some of that pre-work done before you get that yes from the decision maker. So our team has kind of a full due diligence packet that we get over to the security team to the compliance team so they can start taking a look at that before we even get into the contract negotiation. I think another thing I do is that we do a lot of pre-calls with implementation as security and IT, and making sure we're addressing any of the concerns that may come up, after contract negotiation. We're addressing them up front. So when we do get that yes, and we do get the contract out the door and being sent to the lender, we've already kind of addressed all the items that we know have been blockers before. And the big thing, I think, is staying highly organized, right? So, I mean, you need to make sure you're holding everybody accountable. As I keep talking about, there's so many different parties involved in getting these deals
Yeah.
signed. We need to make sure that, hey, the security team within 30 days, this project has to be completed and signed off on, making sure you're holding, that security team to that 30 days. Or from a legal perspective, once it gets into our legal side, making sure that we're putting timings on, I like to say internal SLAs, that those red lines are reviewed and sent back to the lender so everything kind of stays on track. Because if the salesperson isn't highly organized, I guarantee these deals are going to take longer than they're taking now to
Yeah,
close.
and that's a lot of moving part. Are there any tools or data sources you're using to help manage this flow?
Yeah, so we use Salesforce. Salesforce is a great product to, obviously keep track of your opportunity. You can create individual tasks and log calls to make sure everything is kind of itemized out. You're completing those tasks and you're continuing down that progression of getting the deal closed. I use Outlook, obviously, right, to make sure I put in my calendar certain days and thresholds of when I should get, information back from key decision makers or anyone that's a part of getting the contract signed to make sure things are being completed. And again, the due diligence packets, we put together all kinds of materials because what we're seeing is a lot of lenders want, or I'm sure of any space, individual questionnaires and due diligence items, kind of put together for that specific deal. So we've kind of encompassed all of those questions into one large due diligence packet, and we get it out immediately. So that addresses a lot of those questions that come up after the fact.
Yeah, and was that a formal effort? So I'm thinking of sort of your sales process and finding out, where the lags are, where the hiccups are, and what tools or data do we need to address it. How formal was that process? Excuse me, of kind of finding those wedge points.
Yeah, I mean it's a very formal process. I've been selling in the lender space for 20 years. A lot of people call me crazy for that, but I know the process that it takes to get a contract signed. So I feel like the more that we've addressed up front before I do get that yes from a decision maker, the smoother the entire deal
Yeah.
flows. I even start to bring in my implementation team probably a little bit before I did before, just so they're well aware of what's coming down the pike, that we are addressing any maybe questions or concerns or items that need to be done pre-contract signing. So the minute that contract is signed, we're continuing to roll and we're getting the revenue that much faster.
Cool. I wonder, are you seeing any either leading or lagging indicators that, hey, these interventions like are helping on days to close or forecast accuracy? What are you seeing in terms of results?
Yeah, we're seeing great results in that due diligence packet that we kind of designed pre-sales. We've also seen great results from a contract administration standpoint, addressing a lot of the items that we're seeing in the agreement that we know that will be kicked back from legal. We're addressing them immediately up front, working through those negotiations a little bit faster than we have done in the past. And then the big thing I'm seeing is just holding lenders accountable to dates. And what I mean by that is if, something's going to be completed, we don't just have a blank, this will be done over the next, 60, 90, 120 days. I have specific dates my team is putting out there that tasks have to be completed. And that allows the team to kind of follow along, get these deals done in a timely fashion, and everybody's on the same page at the same time.
And are there sort of costs of nonconformance to that? Like how do you like adjudicate that if someone's missing those dates? What happens?
Yeah, so that's where we start our follow up, right? That's why Salesforce and Outlook and making sure we have those dates outlined, and we're tracking them in our CRMs because we're immediately calling, we're sending an email, we're texting. I see a lot of salespeople, they kind of stick to one form of communication. I think that's a big miss,
Yeah.
right? I think in today's world, people are used to texting, right? I think that's probably I get a lot done by text. It's surprising, just following up. People are traveling, people are on the road. A simple text, hey, checking in. I know we missed the date by, a couple days. Is there anything I can do to help push this along? has really kind of pushed the envelope. People leaving a voicemail and maybe just an email, that's not enough a lot of times. It's that text or that other form of communication that helps get that task completed in a timely fashion.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it sounds like you're nailing this. But I'm thinking of that, like that thin line between keeping the process on track and dogging somebody, right? And it sounds like you're managing that, right?
Yeah.
Because you can overdo that as well, correct?
For sure. Sometimes I feel like a project manager on top of my, sales team because, you have to kind of balance these dates and times, but you obviously can't overdo it, right? If you're too involved or sending too many messages, sometimes that pushes off, the person you're selling
Yeah.
to. So you got to really manage your follow-up process, but the key is making sure you're doing multiple opportunities in different formats. If email's not working and you see you sent 3 emails with no response, then maybe a phone call or a text or another form of communication needs to be done.
Yeah, our earlier conversation was a lot on kind of forecast accuracy, and we wandered into sort of away from the specific steps that we're talking about getting after these gaps here to how sales reps view their funnel in total, right? And we talked a little bit about sort of
Yep.
whale hunting and land and expand. Yeah, give me your perspective on how you can improve the someone's pipeline or forecasting by thinking differently and more holistically about your pipeline.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, everyone loves the whales, right? That big opportunity, big revenue generator. But as we talked about, they're the ones that take the longest to close. Dealing with lenders, the higher the revenue contract, the longer that sales process typically is, because there's several layers up at the lender that needs approval. So if you're only focusing on that large deal, and that hits a hiccup or an issue comes up, that can really expand your timeframes for getting deals done. So what I really focus on with my team is, you obviously want your heavy hitters, but look for that small to medium sized deal as well. Typically, those ones move a little bit faster through the pipeline, a little bit quicker to revenue. When you get that contract signed and in place, and it allows small wins as you continually work on that large deal. We've seen that tremendous, over the last, 12 to 24 months of kind of that approach of, filling your pipeline with some of those smaller opportunities. And what I've really seen is some of the small opportunities my team has really closed are starting to turn into those large whale opportunities that we're all looking for. Because you know why? We're getting in there, we're getting a contract signed. Once you have a contract signed, it's usually a lot easier to expand with a current client than put a brand new contract in place. So maybe the first contract doesn't have the revenue that everyone wants, but it makes it much easier to add on additional statement of works or addendums for additional services, which really can drive that contract value up. So small wins along the way, hit those singles. There's nothing wrong with hitting singles and continue working down that path until you can actually get that big deal, work through the pipeline, and close on your end. You want to see all types of opportunities close throughout the year.
Yeah, it's I'm I'm a fan of whale hunting myself, the high risk, high reward deals. But I am hearing what you're saying, like personally, as I think about my own funnel. So it's cool. I know this subject of kind of forecast accuracy and how long it takes to get deals through the cycle is frustrating to a lot of people. So I'm hoping that our conversation might help a little bit. My big takeaway is sort of audit, find those log jams, come up with solutions to those log jams, and there's an internal and an external aspect to then that solution. So I mean, it's a pretty sort of a rigorous, make sense kind of approach, but I think that's where we start, right? Is taking a look at where are those log jams.
100%. Like I said, getting the yes is a hard part of the process, right, for being a salesperson, but it does not stop there. Once you get that yes, please be very organized, be on top of the items that need to be completed to kind of get that deal
Yeah.
signed within a timely fashion. Because I know we're all held accountable. I know my team's held to a monthly quota. Trying to accurately record what's going to sign that month is, there's no exact science. But I know if that pipeline's strong, I know if my team's organized and following up on their opportunities, they're going to win in the end.
Yep. Yeah. And then the second point you make too about kind of that broader view of your pipeline, have a mix of opportunity types in there. Again, it hit me personally. Like I'm thinking about my own. So yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah. And I think I think it's a discussion that a lot of people are going to react to because, again, we've probably interviewed 40 companies, 65 people in the last 6 or 8 months, and this is such a common issue that I really appreciate you showing up here and sharing your expertise. So thank you.
Yeah, not a problem at all. Like I said, we're all in this together. Being a salesperson, at times, right? It's not an easy fate, but we work through it. I think, like I said, being a jack of all trades as a salesperson, I hear all the time, "Hey, I'm great at sales." Well, it's one thing to be good at sales, but you got to be good at, being a project manager, being organized, being timely, because all those things help you win those large
Yep.
opportunities in the
And,
end. So, happy hunting out there.
yeah. I agree. I agree, and for sure. And I'll close the project management thing you've said a couple times, and it's like in the world as it's become in the last couple of years with more complexity in buying and stuff. It's just another key skill. I'll add that to the third tab of things that you shared with me today. That yeah, project management is key going forward. So yeah, I hope it helps people.
and
And
redlining.
re-
And Brian, I think redlining, I think that's a big thing,
yeah,
right? I think you need to, from a salesperson's perspective, you got to know what your legal team will work with you on and where there's a showstopper.
yes,
And so when you get that red line, you kind of work through the showstoppers versus the things that legal can work with, and you're addressing that along the way rather than just kind of throwing it over the fence and knowing that some of this is going to get pushed back on anyway. Get ahead of
yeah.
that. Address it with the lender or who you're selling to, work through some of those redlining items because it's just going to make it easier when everything comes together.
Cool. Yeah, and I hope when we push this out, that folks who have other ideas will maybe throw some ideas in comments because, as you say, we're all in this together, and it's helpful to share. So,
Yep.
thank you, sir, and I really appreciate your time. You've been very generous with it. So, thank you.